Dalimvulo usekela sihlalo wendlu yobuholi bendabuko uma unkosikazi Mhlawuli Hlubi ngilochise abosihlalo bama provinces nabosekela babo abakhona ngaphakathi kulendlu usihlalo we National Cohesion Council ubaba Cecil Lefleur nakhambisana nabo umongameli we Contralesa ubaba namkha inkosi uMathupa Mukwena nakhambisana nabo amalunga wendlu yobuholi bendabuko namalunga wama provinces akhona la ngaphakathi amakhosi wonke weSouth Africa ukhosi Khasiboni ukhosi Gaborone not Khasiboni Gaborone ophethe indlu yamakhosi eBotswana naye ulakithi ngendlela yokuthindana usijoine virtually usihlalo we-CRL Rights Commission uProfessor Musuma kanye nabanye abosihlalo bama chapter 9 institutions abaphethe zamabubulo, that is ama business persons nababeregisani nendlu yobuholi bendabuko uDG nabo bonke abo DG abakhona nembereki zonke zombuso ezikhona ngaphakathi siyanhlonipha siyanlochisa njengendlu yobuholi bendabuko. Ngizokuthatha ke leli thuba ke ngimeme umongameli weSouth Africa His Excellency ubaba uCyril Ramaphosa ukuthi eze azokhulumisana nathi njengendlu yobuholi bendabuko akhulume nabantu abahlala endaweni zamakhosi eSouth Africa. Mongameli you are welcome ukuthi uzokhulumisana namaSouth Africa. Thokoza.
Chairperson of the National House of Traditional Leaders, Ngosi Mahlangu. Deputy Chairperson of the National House of Traditional Leaders, Nkosikazi Mhlawuli. Your Majesties, Kings and Queens of our people, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Babu Amos Masondo, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Mayor Thandi Modise, the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who is attending virtually, Deputy Minister Obed Bapela, Deputy Minister of COCTA, Ministers who are in attendance, either in person or virtually, as well as deputy ministers, premiers of our various provinces, members of the portfolio and select committees, MECs, chairpersons and deputy chairpersons of the provincial houses of traditional leaders, and all traditional leaders of our people, President of Contralesa, Dade Mathupa Mukwena, Chairperson of the National Cohesion Council, Mr. Cecil Lefleur, Khosi Gaborone, all the way from Botswana, attending virtually, we welcome you. Leaders of political parties, directors general, heads of departments, and ladies and gentlemen. I wish to greet you all in the name of our government of the Republic of South Africa, and extend warm greetings indeed. It is my singular honor and pleasure to stand before you and to address you this year at the opening of the National House of Traditional Leaders. It is always a pleasure to be in your presence and to come and share a few thoughts with yourselves, but also to be enlightened about matters that affect our people in the areas where you rule. I wish to begin by paying tribute to our traditional leaders who have passed away over the past year. We mourn their loss, and we would like to say, on behalf of the people of South Africa, that may their souls rest in peace. Some of our leaders have passed away due to the deadly pandemic that is still very much with us. The coronavirus has claimed the lives of over 2.5 million people worldwide and over 50,000 in our own country. I'd like to express my gratitude to you as the traditional leaders of our people for joining government to fight this pandemic. You openly and demonstrably worked with us to ensure that communities observe the regulations and the protocols, including respect to funerals and other gathering regulations. You have assisted with the procurement of personal protective equipment and the distribution of food parcels together with various stakeholders. It was a joy to hear how in various of your communities, our traditional leaders were deeply immersed and involved in things such as food distribution and assisting our people as they encountered this great hardship. In partnership with the Department of Social Development, the National House of Traditional Leaders also helped with the distribution of child-friendly masks, of sanitizers and other supplies to 23 early childhood development centers in 8 of our provinces. Would like to thank you for your contribution, and indeed, what you always do is in service to our people, but we saw it in action. We saw you at work. With partnerships of this nature, we can do much more to improve the plight of our communities. There's just no doubt about that. If it were not for these concerted efforts, many more lives would have been lost, and many, many, many people would have died unnecessarily. You have also understood, as we all do, that sacrifices have had to be made if we are to keep ourselves and communities safe. And in fact, in many cases, we found a very keen understanding on your part as we interacted with you continuously. It is possible that we did not interact with you as much as we should have, but to the extent where we did, we found your contributions most helpful and incisive. You have also understood that the regulations in place are for the health and safety of the entire nation. I want to commend the National House of Traditional Leaders, the provincial houses, and Contralesa for your management of the customary initiation process during the pandemic. This was going to be one testing area for us as a government, but in you we found great understanding, great support for the adherence to the regulations. But we also found much more than that. You were creative, you came forward with ideas, which proved once again that working together is the best way of tackling the problems that beset our country. I was pleased that we were able to find each other and build a compact, even around a very difficult and trying issue such as initiation. As hard a decision as it was to make, you agreed that we would suspend initiation in all provinces when the pandemic was at its greatest height. As a result, we were able to ensure that fewer people were exposed to the virus. When the regulations were eased and some schools reopened, you worked with us to create awareness around health and safety at those schools that were practicing. Traditional leaders, through their structures and working with the government, conducted rigorous awareness campaigns and monitoring, helping to ensure that illegal initiation schools were closed down. We know that the death of a single initiatee is one death too many, and we must build on the improvements that we have made in this regard. I must say that as you made your inputs and enlightened us of how best the initiation process can be run, we were overjoyed. We were overjoyed because we realized that we've got traditional leaders who are able to adapt, who are able to work together at a very deep level with government. Government urges the institution to strive for 0 deaths, in line with the slogan that people must live. Let me provide progress on a number of issues raised during our last engagement. At the opening of this House last year, we said that we would host the Presidential Summit on Land. At the time, we indicated that it would be important for each provincial house to have their own engagements to inform the process leading up to this national summit. Such consultations would include broader society, such as women's groups, people living with disabilities, and the youth. I'm advised that owing to the lockdown restrictions, these provincial engagements could not be concluded, and it is quite understandable why they couldn't. I am, however, pleased that even under these difficult circumstances, the Interministerial Committee on Land Reform, chaired by our Deputy President, David Dabete Mabuza, has continued to do further work on the key issues. For example, analyses have been done on experiences and lessons from a number of countries, such as Ghana, to supplement what was learned last year during study tours to Botswana as well as to Uganda. The Interministerial Committee has continued to oversee work on policy research around the important issue of communal land tenure. We remain committed to hosting the Presidential Summit on Land and it is critical that we do resuscitate the initial plans to convene provincial engagements beforehand, so that we can gain from the wisdom not only of our traditional leaders, but of ordinary people on the ground. And this will give us a great opportunity to move beyond just sloganeering, theorizing, but to hear the lived experience of our people on this most important issue, which is in the end about nation building, social cohesion, but also progress. The institution of traditional leadership must be at the forefront of both land reform and the agrarian revolution that we must have in our country. The National House partnered with the Solidarity Fund to implement the Farming Inputs Voucher Project, which in many ways helped to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on traditional farming communities. I've further been advised that the Department of Traditional Affairs and the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development now have a memorandum of understanding in support of agricultural projects in rural communities. This to me represents great progress. On the matter of the powers and functions of traditional leaders, the broad consultations we agreed to last year will need to be conducted. And it is a great pity that this important work was interrupted by COVID-19. We will need to be creative about consultation mechanisms under the new conditions that COVID-19 has imposed on us to ensure that we do reach all sectors of society. On the legislative front, there's also been progress. Earlier this week, the Recognition of Customary Marriages Amendment Bill was passed by Parliament and will soon be sent to me for assent. The Customary Initiation Bill has been considered by both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces and is currently on the National Assembly order paper for consideration. I am pleased to report that the Traditional and Khoisan Leadership Act will come into effect from the 1st of April 2021. I'm sorry that it is not with the immediate effect that I would always like to see things happening, but it will come into effect on the 1st. Now, this in itself is a significant milestone. The country's Khoi and San leaders will, after the following the prescribed processes, for the first time enjoy official recognition and will serve in the national and provincial houses in their own name and right, and not just as bystanders. In October last year, I announced the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan for our country. As we emerge from the second wave of COVID-19 infections, our focus is now on recovery and rebuilding. In other words, we come from the COVID, which we still are in, but we implemented a number of measures for relief, but we are now saying we must move beyond relief and get into recovery and to rebuilding. We must, with urgency, apply ourselves to initiatives that will get our economy back on track, that will stimulate job creation, and that will support community development. the Invest Rural Master Plan, which aims to unlock the potential, may I add, the great potential of traditional communities, was launched in Phokeng on the 25th of February this year. The master plan is expected to capacitate traditional leaders, traditional councils and communities to engage in the fight against rural poverty, but also, more importantly, to foster self-reliance. During the December strategic planning session, the National House, the provincial houses, and Contralesa passed several resolutions on a number of important issues. One of these resolutions was to develop an action plan on 4 key themes. And these themes being socioeconomic development in traditional communities, empowerment of traditional councils, and also very importantly, the empowerment of women, and more broadly, social cohesion, nation building, and moral regeneration. We look forward to the work that will be done in these important areas together with the relevant departments this year. Gender-based violence remains a massive problem in our country and threatens the health and safety of women and children. We note with appreciation the efforts of traditional leaders to fight this scourge, as well as other harmful cultural practices. This includes the commitment by the National House to work with the men's sector of the South African National AIDS Council, that is SANAC, to establish men's parliament in all 882 traditional councils. Now, this is truly an outstanding concept. I understand that the plan is for these men's parliament to meet once every quarter, where men and boys can discuss gender-based violence and femicide and the contribution that they can make in ending a shameful practice that has rooted itself in our country of gender-based violence and femicide. And it is in this area that I believe that our traditional leaders can play an outstanding role in tackling gender-based violence, but also in pointing out more clearly to all and sundry that the beating of women, the rape of women, and the killing of women and children is clearly not part of our cultures. It's not part of the DNA that has been passed to us from generation to generation. So, Your Majesties, members of the House, the coronavirus pandemic will continue to be with us for some time to come. I think that should now be clear to all of us. Someone was telling me that the Spanish flu of 1918 took a number of years to finally work itself out, even here in this country. So we must now know that we are in for a long haul. This virus has changed our lives, it has changed the way we do things, but I'm glad to see that we have adapted. We have adopted new ways of working, new ways of doing things. We've also adopted technology, processes that enable us to be able to meet rather cost effectively, but to carry on doing the work that needs to be done. And it is in this regard that some of the more important economic recovery processes, such as the digital revolution that must take place in our country, also needs to be focused on rural communities. Because quite often the temptation, and it is a temptation that even private sector companies that usually control this or implement this fall into, that they will tend to focus on the urban areas and leave out the rural areas. But in our country, through the work that you do, through the focus on the important issues that should happen to improve the lives of our people, to get us to move away from poverty, inequality, and unemployment, we rely on you to be able to work with us. The task of rebuilding our economy and our country is an immense task. The tough partnerships between government, traditional leaders, the private sector and civil society, and other stakeholders will be key to us being successful in all that we do. We have demonstrated over the past year that when we work together, we can achieve more. And I'd like to say that when you have a sense that we as government are weakening and faltering on just working together with you, I urge that you should never tire to raise it. Because sometimes as things move very quickly, very fast, the tendency sometimes is to move ahead without concluding all the processes, for instance, of consultation. I say this in the light of some of the complaints that you have raised, particularly as we were navigating our way around COVID-19, where, yes, traditional leaders said, we have not been as deeply consulted as we should have been, particularly on important matters where you play the critical role on initiation. And we conceded that. But what we will say is that our partnership with you as traditional leaders is sacrosanct. We want to consolidate that. We want to build a very strong relationship with our traditional leaders, because for us, it is worth everything. We've got to have a very respectful, functional, and progressive relationship with yourselves and be willing to discuss anything that affects our people. I'm often accused of being too consultative. I guess the accusation could also be passed to you, because by your very nature, by the very way you do your work, you are consultative. You consult communities at a very deep level, and you can imagine how you do it. Our forebears used to do it under trees, in a shade, where you would find Mahotla, Izimbizo, in progress, and the traditional leader would probably and mostly be the last to speak, having heard the views of our communities. And this, for us, is precious. And we want to be able to advance this process of consultation. So even as I'm accused, and even as you may well be accused of being too consultative, I conclude to myself that we are doing what our forebears have always done, where nothing is ever done without proper consultation with our people. It is a practice and a process that I will continue to hold on to, because there is nothing that beats being consultative, that beats hearing all the views of everyone. I forever remember the first president of our democracy, Madiba, because he molded his leadership just around that, consulting people, hearing their views, and at times he would even seek out those who disagreed with him the most and say, I want to hear those views, because it is after hearing the views that he's then able, with great confidence, to move forward and, yes, be decisive. I look forward to our continued engagement on these and other important issues that you would like us to discuss and to debate. And may I say that the way our relationship is evolving, we've had the courage, we've had also the foresight of even discussing the most difficult and intricate matters. I remember when we were negotiating the Constitution, we always approached it on the basis that there is no problem without a solution. And I'm glad to know that that is how you also approach matters, that whatever problem we may have, there's always a solution lurking around in the background. And those are the solutions that we must find to advance the interests of our people on whatever issue, whether it's on land, the economy, the empowerment of women and young people, and getting our rural communities, rural areas, to be hives of economic activity. So in this debate, I would like to hear as much as you possibly can put on the table, and we will have the courage to engage in the various issues that you are going to raise. One of the things that I believe that is becoming more and more of an attribute with yourselves as traditional leaders is that you no longer, and you don't want just to be raising issues from a complaint point of view, you want to come forward with solutions. Now, that, I think, is the approach we should use. Let's raise the issues, but also be able to say, in our view, this is the solution to resolve this matter. And if we can be oriented, all of us, in that way, then tackling problems and challenges becomes the more easier. I have seen it, even as I've interacted with a number of leaders who are part of this council. I've really been heartened to know that the leadership in the main of traditional leaders is that we should find solutions. So I come here to open this house and will participate in the debate and listen very carefully to the views and thoughts that will be put forward. Because if there ever was any time in the life of our country where we need to listen to one another, we need to seek out solutions, this is the time. In times of crisis, in times of great challenge, those who are wise utilize the time, the opportunity, and the space that they have to look for solutions rather than to continuously just raise problems. And if we remember that there is no problem without a solution, let us come with solutions and put them on the table and find the various options that can take our people forward. Honorable Chairperson, I wish the National House of Traditional Leaders well over the coming year and look forward to deepening our very progressive collaboration on all matters that confront our people. I thank you.
Ngithokoze Mongameli ikulumo osinikele yona ngibawe amakhosi kwangasi ngamnikela umongameli elinye ihlombe kuyikulumo aqeda ukusinikela yona ngibawa simbetheleni izandla ngiyathokoza ke bonda bezitha njengenjwayelo siyazi ukuthi nakaqeda ukusikhulumisa umongameli vane siye siyokuthatha intombe kuzokwenzeka ke ngaleyo ndlela siyathokoza mongameli ikulumo oqeda ukusinikela yona it was very encouraging especially during this time of COVID. Into ichoko kithi amandebele vane bathi unonkhadanyana uzokhanywa lithuli. It means that it's not going to be business as usual. We are going to work differently. Our minister has said that if you want to go far, you must work together. We are definitely going to work together with this government, but also work with speed because our people are very frustrated as we speak, and they are becoming very impatient with us. So we will be meeting again, Honorable President, on the 11th of March, where we will be debating this speech and also coming up with the solutions that the President has spoken about. We will be meeting in this very same room, bonda visit. Bonda visit simthokoze ke umongameli. Sizokubawa ukuthi bonke laba abangaphakathi ku endlini le yesibetha mthetho baphume nathi nasesiphuma bayokuthatha inthombe nathi nomongameli lapha ngaphambili kwe National Assembly. Ngibawa ukuchaza ihlelo esizolandela nasokujuda inthombe amalunga wendlu yopholi bendabuko ingwenyama umathanzima abongqongqotshe abakhona nangabe bakhona nomongameli futhi ngithi ke sokuthatha isithombe sokthoma lapho ke bazoku-include no somlomo weparlamente kunye no chairperson we NCOP. Then bese ke i-session yesibili yenthombe zokuba malunga wendlu yopholi bendabuko nabo sihlalo bendlu bezindlu kuma provinces. Then sokugcina ke kuzoba sithombe sizosithatha sisonke abakhona la ngaphakathi kulendlu. Siphekile nokupheka mongameli. Deputy Chairperson has led abo chef bala iparlamente ukuthi kube ne lunch esizoyidla, so sibawa ukunimema nonke na mongameli siyakumema nangabe ithuba zokuba khona ukuthi uzokudla nathi ukudla kwamadina. Bonda bezitha ngibawa ningamukele ningivumele ukuthi ngivale indlu le tot bese kubonana nge-11 sika March. Ngiyathokoza.
right, so we'll do the break. Okay, power down. Sharp. There we go. All right, so buddy. Okay, I'm coming. Okay, so okay, I'm coming. You want me to do now? Let me just de-reach everything and then I'll come to you. All right, so sharp.
Ma, come è stata? Non è sanitizer, ma